Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, USA Today's NFL Wire site covering the Arizona Cardinals. We're up at episode 520, the second of our two free agency previews. With me recording on a Thursday afternoon is Seth Cox, my co-host from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, the Arizona Cardinals site from SB Nation, and also one of the hosts of the original Draft Breakdown podcast. Again, next week, we will have two shows with Seth joining me, with Justin Higdon, his co-host for the draft show, joining us on this show. So it'll be like getting a couple extra bonus episodes that way to talk about the NFL Combine that is underway. Seth, we were going to talk just free agency, but the NFLPA came out and released their report cards for the 32 teams. And like we talked about last year, my goodness, this is one of the smartest things that the Players Association has done in years, because it puts pressure on the teams, and some people might think not much of it, but honestly, I think it is brilliant publicity to, have these report cards about their facilities and working, conditions and staff and things like this. And the Cardinals, still not great, but definitely going in the right direction, right?
Yeah, and that was the big thing, is some improvement. And we know that they're trying to continue that. So, the biggest one, obviously, outside of maybe the family situation, was the facility. And one of the things about the facility that we know that is transforming right now is that they are moving all the business people out of their Tempe facility, or they already have, if I remember correctly.
They have. They opened up the call center, the other building, about a month ago.
Right. So now, theoretically, I assume, and we don't know for sure, and we won't know for sure until they tell us, because that's how businesses like that work, is that they will probably expand their training facility in Tempe, right? Like
it would make sense, right?
Yeah, it's all there already and things of that. So this is all, it's good. They're going in the right direction. But at the same time, those promises have to be kept. And this is obviously an Arizona Cardinals based podcast, and that's where we go with all of this stuff, and that's where our all of our interest kind of reigns. But it's interesting because you can have the right idea, right, or you can make promises, but if you don't actually follow through on them, it literally doesn't matter if you're the best team in the NFL. You will get hammered in this NFLPA thing, and you don't have to look any further than the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, obviously, this year's 2024's report card is based on before the 2023 season.
Well, or during. It was
during. Yeah, or
Season.
during. But, the Hunt family, or Clark Hunt, is the worst rated owner in the NFL.
And to be fair, the context of the grading the owner was not about football. It was about the belief that the owners will spend money to improve facilities. Only three coaches or three owned teams had F owner grades. It was the Chiefs, the Steelers, and the Cardinals. Three of the, interestingly enough, Three long time family-owned teams.
And the reason why, and then you go up and you look at it, right? And food cafeteria C, and this is the chief C minus, the nutritionist, dietitian F, 31st, locker room 28th F, training room 31st D, training staff 32nd D. So that all goes to the owner, and they're saying basically, we don't believe that you're going to invest it. Because remember, the owner came out and said, well, you guys played so long that we didn't have time to do the renovations that we had promised. So that, again, is Chiefs based. So turning this back to the Cardinals, he's rated as the third worst owner in the NFL. Whether you agree with that or not does not matter. That is how
that's the perception of Cardinals players. So this is not all players. This is their own players voting for their team conditions. And so the Cardinals players do not trust Bidwill to spend, which is really kind of interesting, because some of the players just they are impacted by just kind of reputation, because while they were voting, the team was upgrading things, right?
Right. Well, and so that's the thing, is if those things are being upgraded, but the upgrades are not done yet, then what's the response? And the response is, well, we can't believe you until you actually do it. And to be fair, I mean, I think Junior, and I know he's not Junior, but I think Junior does a much better job of spending than his father did. But at the same time, you have to actually go out and prove those things before they believe you. Whether that's fair or not is a different conversation. And so for Bidwill to be an F and the third worst owner in the NFL, it is telling that do what you promise. Improve the locker room, 31st in the NFL. Improve the training room, 25th in the NFL. Improve the weight room, which they did improve. We have to acknowledge that. They went from 31st to 27th. And that was because they replaced apparently the hazard that was the weight room before.
And then, replace some racks and stuff like that. But, it's interesting because, the Cardinals overall went from 31st to 27th. It's important to note some of the improvements they did make. Now, some of that was Jonathan Gannon.
Right.
Because, one of the things that was the knock is that they didn't feel they had enough strength and conditioning, strength coaches. Jonathan Gannon quadrupled the strength and conditioning staff, creating an entire department of football performance, instead of just Buddy Morris and Mark Stevens as the only guys there, or whoever. I can't remember who it was. It was his assistant. But
it was a nobody. Like, it wasn't like they had, and that's still something that they're fighting. But
they expanded it to you have Buddy Morris, who's over, recovery and rehabilitation. Reconditioning, I think, is he's the senior. He's a senior reconditioning guy. You've got Evan Marcus as the top strength coach, and you've got 4 other assistant strength coaches now with different roles. And so that improved. They stopped charging the players for food. By the
way, which was the biggest one to me, because that became. And
there was a laughing stock. Wow.
Right, rightfully so, was a laughing stock. Like, you were a joke of an organization because of that. And so,
who's the laughing stock is right now is the Chargers for charging for childcare right now.
Right. And so that's the thing, is they did a nice job. And you look at it, they were one of 14 teams that last year, I'm reading last year's, one of 14 teams that did not offer a family room, and one of 11 teams that did not offer daycare. They've improved both of those situations, which is what these things are supposed to do, right? They're supposed to say, this is what we need from you as an organization, or as athletes or workers. and you need to improve that. The food services, like you said, went from tied for last at 30th, and now they're
And I think they
28th.
still the quality is still in question by the players, but I think the fact that they don't get charged for it now makes things a little bit better. The one that it's really kind of interesting is what they think about the locker room and the training. Is it feels they think the locker room is too small and that the lockers are too small for their space. Like, they have to also understand the Cardinals underwent an multi-million-dollar renovation of the weight room and locker room just 10 years ago.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing is what is hard for the NFL to understand right now, and I know this is going to sound really silly, but when you're coming from Ohio State, or when you're coming from LSU, or you're coming from,
or even Arizona State,
Alabama or Georgia, and you're coming from you have better equipment and a bigger facility and a nicer facility than the pro team, that's going to affect your grade. And it's hard for us to understand that, because we're looking at it and we're like, this is really, this isn't bad. Like, what are these guys just, they're just being selfish athletes. And
it's how you, and ultimately, there's just a value point. Because like Steve Keim, when he was on the radio like a year ago, kind of as something, when they asked him about the facilities, it's like, it's, the locker room's functional, and like Kelvin Beachum talks about, and a lot of these guys have their own gyms, and teams gave players money under COVID negotiations, that teams did give players an allotment so that they could go purchase their own equipment back in the day. And so, I will say this, I myself have had the opportunity of covering the team over the last, more than a decade. I've been in the Cardinals locker room a lot. And when and I was there before, so I saw the locker room pre-renovation, post-renovation. It was a world of difference. Now, I also, as a season ticket holder at ASU, when they expanded their football facility, me and my brother-in-law, we got a tour of the new locker room, and ASU's locker room, far better than the Cardinals, but it's different because these are college kids, and that's where they stay. They live there. They live on campus. Right. And so you do need a little bit more than that, because they can't have they don't have a place where they can have their own equipment. That has to be better. They spend a ton of time there. And so it's kind of like that. I don't expect the Cardinals to, and I will say, the team facility, which was built in the 90s, you look at it, and other than the Cardinals branding, you can't tell that it's a world-class facility. It's kind of low-key. It's meant to be. It's not meant to be boom, boom, boom. It was built architecturally with the purpose to be low impact,
right.
And so it does look like a 90s brick office building.
Right.
But,
well, I think the biggest takeaway from this for me was obviously the improvements, which we talked about, which are good, but it's funny how fast things that were looked at as positives fall by the wayside, and one of those biggest ones was the team plane, right? And Mike Bidwell really bragged about the fact that they bought their own Arizona Cardinals plane, and if you read last year's, they were 12th, and the positives were no roommates, a lot of first class seats. But this is where the minute details come in, and again, where you can brag about, we bought this team a plane, but the reality is they bought a smaller plane than the team usually used to travel on.
And what's funny about like this year's is that it's just about team preference, because more like last year's complaint was that they didn't have enough room. This year, they more people think they have enough room. They have the same planes.
Right.
and another thing that I always find interesting is they have players have no problem grading ownership because they are distance from them low. They have no problem with grading facilities low. But anytime it involves staff, they can't help it. Those are people they see day to day. They never grade them that low. Like Jonathan Gannon, A-. Okay, now that's low. Yeah, that's great. But you know how many coaches got an A- or better? 20 teams. 20 teams got an A- grader or I guess because players believe their coach. Unless they're in a really bad head coaching situation, players, believe and trust their coach. They believe and trust even if the strength equipment isn't sufficient, the strength staff they like because they're the guys that they work with. The training, they might the training tables, the training part where they have to recovery, they might not like them, but the training members, the PTs and the ATs, though the professionals, therapists there, guess what? They will grade them highly. It's always very, very interesting how that happens every single year.
Yeah, and what's interesting is the biggest complaint about all of those is, and even though they made the efforts to, upgrade, the amount of staff is still the amount of staff, right? 14th and like you said, they have, or 22nd, and do they have enough full-time trainers? 82% think that they do, but that's still only good enough for 22nd. 84% for a full-time physical therapist. That's good enough for 14th overall. So it's, top half of the league. Hot tub space, again, something that you and I would be like, really, like just go sit in your own hot tub at home. But like these guys are looking at it and going, dude, in college, like we had, we had 20 hot tubs and 20 cold tubs, and now we have 5 and 5, and I don't know what they have, but that's how they view this, and that's what is, it makes it difficult for people to really kind of grasp, is that it's not just cut and dry. Like, yes, these are 100% first world problems, but when you're trying to compete, and this is what I wrote, when you're trying to compete with other teams for just simple things like free agents, and you don't offer daycare, for some people that's all it takes, right? And so like little things like that will give them a better chance at competing to get those things, because at the end of the day they people will be like, well, again, look at the Chiefs. Well, you know what? Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, they ain't walking through that door, man. So, you have to look at it from that perspective.
Yeah. And on the other side of things, though, ultimately, it's just a brilliant ploy by the NFLPA to pressure teams to create
owners,
better, to just create better working environments. Because, I think,
well, let's be honest.
Honestly, it comes down to potential for playing time and winning, and dollars and cents to contracts. Ultimately, because the other stuff is just extra, right? If you feel like the Cardinals, even if they've got a crap training staff, if they offer you the most money and you think you're going to play there, guess what? You're going to go there, and you'll, if you don't think it's enough, you're going to go get your own weight set. You're going to make sure that you have the stuff where you live to be able to train.
Right, and that's what it comes down to. And so when you look at that, in general, you have to look at the fact that this is, a situation where this franchise, unfortunately has an uphill battle in perception. I mean, that's just genuinely the first thing. There's a very negative perception of the Arizona Cardinals. So how do you combat that, right? Like, what do you do? And this is, again, the first steps. These are baby steps, but at least they're happening finally, right?
Yeah. Let's move on, get to our free agency preview. Coming up next on the Rise of Sierra podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. Seth and I have our plans for the Cardinals. We'll hear what Seth has to say about what he'd do with this offseason, and we'll talk about that coming next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best of our Cardinals talk on the web. Free agency plans, we both of us, without consulting one another, other than a few comments just right before we started recording, kind of put together our off-season plan, what we're going to do for the Cardinals this off-season, cuts, trades, things like that, signings. And not the draft. I mean, that's something we'll deal with later, and we'll project kind of what we think. But let's hear what Seth does. I don't know how you want to do that. I'm assuming you went the same thing, both Spot Track and Over the Cap. After things have adjusted, both have the Cardinals sitting at $51.1 million in cap space. How I'll talk about mine, I'll go, okay, that's where we start with. These are the cap things that we're doing. These are the things I'm doing. Trades, cuts, and then kind of talk about the transactions and how much cap space we think it's going to be after that. So let's hear what you've got to say, then we'll discuss it.
Yeah, so it's interesting when you go to Spot Track, and I don't know what Over the Cap always freezes my computer, so I just don't use it. It's silly, but whatever. But like when you go actually into like the salary cap manager, it says they have 42.7 million in cap space.
That's the total. So that the 51.1 is the top 51, which is what you use for the offseason. And the 42.2
I wonder why
is
they
the
don't
actual cap.
I wonder why they don't do like update that so it's the same, right? Anyways, going forward, you unfortunately I think that they're going to cut DJ Humphries, so that gives you an extra 9 million on top of that. So right around 60-ish million right there. I don't know. The thing is with that move is you don't know if it's a good or bad move, but you also know that it doesn't change anything for at least the first like 8 to 10 games of the season.
Well,
right?
we're talking. Kyler got hurt at the beginning of December. He didn't come back till November. DJ Humphries, a 300-pound man, did it at the end of December. I don't think and if we recall, he couldn't have his surgery right away. They had to wait. And so we're talking earliest December. He's coming back.
Right. And so, you look at it, it's, you and I have talked about this. I'm not sure that we agree with this move in any way, shape, or form. However, it is a business, and we're doing a business-based transactions on this episode. And so $9 million, that's where we'll leave this because that's all I really have to say about it. Again, not saying I agree with it, just what my thought is. From there, I think, and I know this will rub some people the wrong way, I cut Dennis Gardeck, so that now you're up to a little over 12. Cut Dennis Daly. He doesn't have a spot on this roster, it feels like. I think you and I've kind of talked about that. That gives you
another 1.6.
Over 6. Yeah, and it gives you over 13.7. This will maybe surprise people, or maybe you were paying attention last year and it won't. Cut Cam Thomas. Again, not saying that he needs to be cut or that the play deserves to be cut, but I mean, they didn't play him.
Yeah.
Really,
his savings isn't a significant, like, what is it, less than $1 million?
Yeah, it's about it. Yeah.
And so, like, I think he'll probably be on the roster to compete, but ultimately won't make the team probably.
Yeah, and so that's kind of where it ends. I mean, there's a lot of like back end of the roster stuff where it.
Yeah,
really
we're talking
matter.
We're talking major cap savings type things that we're going to add
Right.
cap before you make your moves.
Yeah, and so that gives an additional, 14.5. Call it for easy math. So when you go from your 14.5, now you're at 66.3 million. Realistically, you're at 66.5 million. So you've actually got some room to make some moves now. And so the first one that I think that they need to make, and the one that I would do, because I think it gives you some flexibility immediately in your off season. What you want to do is I go and I bring in Kevin Dotson. So Dotson is going to cost you probably 15 to 16 million a year. Obviously, the way that everything kind of works, right, is you're not going to pay him 16 million a year, right? Like, just
Right, they won't count that much. I figured that. So if you're say, what do you think you're going to get him at 64?
yeah, 464.
Then you're probably your first year cap hit is we're going to be around 7 million. I would you can probably work it, but like I if I were calculating that, I'd say let's go with a $10 million cap hit in year one.
Right. So I think let's do 10 for easy math. That brings you down to 55 in a half. What's interesting is, what do they need for the draft again? I don't even remember. Jeez. How much cap space do they need for the draft picks?
I don't know.
I know.
I don't know off the top of my head.
I hate that rule. But and so you look at it. So that's the first thing I do. And what that does is that frees you up. That frees you up to go a couple different ways. First off, obviously, now you can continue to pursue a veteran left tackle like we talked about, Donovan Smith. I don't think Tyron Smith would come here, and that's not a shot at Arizona. I just don't think he's going to go anywhere but Dallas, but that's, you can do that. Or you can get a guy on late day one, early day two to kind of compete. So there are some options, but that's the first one I make. So $10 million. The next one I would make would be to trade. And obviously we've talked about this, and I don't know how it would work in terms of if they would take 35. So we'll make it a little bit of a upgrade, and we'll say it's 27. Again, I have no problem with it. And I would trade 27 for L'Jarius Sneed. Now you've
stealing my thunder, man. You're stealing my thunder.
Sorry, man. but I mean, but like we said, that gives you, again, flexibility, right? I know you lose a draft pick. Ideally, you lose 35, but let's not make this overly Cardinal centric and be
what
like,
are you thinking contract? Just a preview. I said 4 years, 75.
Okay, I was gonna say 490.
Oh,
or
okay,
sorry, no,
okay.
Sorry, I meant 590. Sorry, 590.
Okay. So yeah, that's kind of right in the same thing.
Yeah, so 590 with basically, realistically, it's more like 4, but just for housekeeping, it makes it easier. So that's where I would be with that. That gives you just a little bit more wiggle room. And again, the idea behind all of this is freedom. And what I mean by that is the ability to then go pursue other guys in the draft, especially, where you're not having to say, okay, let's hope Enos Rakestraw gets here. Okay, let's hope, Kamari Lassiter gets here. Let's hope, or, okay, we're going to take Terrion Arnold at 4 because Marvin Harrison Jr. went 3, and we just don't want to take the chance of missing him. And man, we desperately need a cornerback, right? Like, that's my whole thing. So those are the first 2 moves I make. I think that sets you up for the draft. We're not going to go over the draft, obviously, but just that part. And then from there, I offer Javon Kinlaw a 2-year, $14 million deal that gives you a little bit more juice than what he would get from San Francisco, likely, and puts the ball in his court. All he can do is say is no, right? But I think that gives you just a little bit more of a potential to sign him. And then the other guy I go get along the defensive line is Greg Gaines. He's a younger guy. I think you can get him for like a 3 years, $10 million type deal. And he's going to be 27 this year. So that falls right in line with kind of everything you're doing, right? 2 to 3 years, but also a guy that can start in year 1 and then changes, or not changes, but gets, has more options in year 2 and 3. So those are the big ones on the offensive or in that way. And then from there, I try to pick up an inside linebacker. I think we talked a little bit about it. I would go grab Josie Jewell. Again, I don't think it's going to cost you a ton. They do have his market value up now. So let's see. So $7.5 million. So that might be a little more than you want to spend. So if you can get him for 2 years, 15 million, is that something you would do? I probably would, just so you don't have to overreach. And then the last move that I would make would be you went and got a corner, obviously, in L'Jarius Sneed. We talked about a lot of guys that you could go and grab, but the one I would grab, and I thought you and I discussed this quite a bit, would be Dane Jackson, the Buffalo corner that looks like he can play a little bit. He should be getting, maybe a 2-year, $6 million type deal. Again, not a crazy amount of money, would give you a little freedom in that range and allow you to go pursue other guys.
And that's a nice play there. And it allows, it makes it so they don't have to rely on all their young cornerbacks that they've got. Because coming back, they've basically got four former rookies. So 4 second-year guys coming back that they kind of control. You got Catrell Clark, and you got Garrett Williams, Starling Thomas, and then Devon Wilson, all of whom started games last year. And on one hand, you're like, yeah, I like that. I like having the young, but do you want that to be what you go into next season for? No,
right.
No. You got to bring in someone with a little bit of juice, a little bit of veterans. I do like that you did that. That you not only you traded for Sneed, who's not quite at veteran leader, but he's playmaker, and then you bring in a Dane Jackson who can be, and it'll allow 2 to 3 of those, so 2 to 3 of those 4 young guys to then have to compete, and you're not going, oh, those guys are making the team just because they're on the roster.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of where you have to look at it. There's some little, intricate things after that you can do. I think you can, look to add a tight end like you and I talked about. You probably, depending on the health of Jeff Swaim, bring back Jeff Swaim. If not, you go in, bring in a guy like we talked about, like a Robert Tonyan for 1 year, $2.5 million. So same type of contract, but I don't know if those move the needle as much as the one.
Well, my question is this, because so you think now again, this is what you would do. You think that the Cardinals will make any sort of splash? Like you have them going and get Kevin Dotson, and that's going to be your big free agent addition. You're going to throw a lot of money at him. Do you think that that's something that the Cardinals would do? I like we talked about in the other show. I'm like, I want to see this. I want to see if they're going to splash for anyone, or if we're going to see year 2 of 1 to 2 year deals. Kind of is, hey, we will carefully fill our roster with guys that we trust that might not be stars, and then we're going to build with young around them. But you think that they're going to go with, now obviously they make the splash with Sneed. That's different. That's a different thing, because you're not signing in free agency. You're treating him like an asset on the team, right? I view trades different than free agents.
Correct. I would agree with that.
And so you're going to have a splash trade for Sneed and a splash signing with Dodson. But yeah, I do like the moves overall. Dotson would be a really nice addition, and like you mentioned in the other show, not only does it help the Cardinals, it means that the Rams have to fill a hole, which is, if you can weaken an opponent. The same thing with Kinlaw. Not that Kinlaw was playing significantly, but you still have to find somebody to then fill that role. I like all the moves. They're different than I did. Like, a couple of those things are there as well. I forget. What did you do? Are you planning on the draft at receiver?
Yeah, that's where I would go with the draft is. And the nice thing is, with the way I kind of played this out, is obviously you need a left tackle and you want to add a wide receiver, but nothing is like dire straits. if you don't leave with one or the other, you're not killing yourself in any way. So that's where I kind of wanted to go to, is that you're in a good spot. You've got a lot of talent. And from there, kind of figure it out. That's where I'm at.
Of the guys that you have them signing, who do you feel are the most likely that the Cardinals would go after?
I think guys like Gaines, Jewel, not necessarily those guys, but players of that ilk are probably where they're going to end up. I do think they make a run at like a Dotson, but a guy, and I don't. Again, Jess and I didn't discuss this before, so apologies if I step on toes. But like if they instead go after a Jonah Jackson, who would be like a tier 2, right, to Dotson. Like obviously Dotson is the guy that every team wants, but if you don't get him, it's not like, oh, there's no hope. Like Jonah Jackson would be a fantastic guy that you'd be like, oh, that's not just a secondary type of play, but that's a guy that can start and play significant time for a contender.
Yeah. Coming up next on the Rise of Sea Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's move on to what I've got. That's coming up next on Rise of Sea Red. We're back on the Rise of Sea Red podcast, best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. So I did things. So we do, ours do cross paths a little bit. So we're going to start. The Cardinals have $51.1 million in cap space to start the offseason. This is how I go. Cut DJ Humphries. Do I want to do that? No. I don't like it, but football wise it makes sense. The only reason it wouldn't make sense for me, and I can see this. You cut him, you're getting nothing. You eat that money if you've got space for it. You could, if he comes back in December and you've already got a tackle replacement for him, he's got a year left on his deal. You can get something for him. And so I think they're going to be more short-sighted. But
by the way, neither of us are advocating this. I want to strongly say that.
We just think it's going to happen.
Yeah, but we also are trying to be semi-realistic about these things and not be like, yep, they're going to sign Kevin Dotson. They're going to trade a third-round pick for L'Jarius Sneed. They're going to sign Michael Pittman and T. Higgins.
Yes.
We're trying to be somewhat some of them are still pie in the sky, but
this is not building a Madden team.
Right, exactly.
That's fun. Then I make two other cost-cutting moves. These are obvious. Cutting Zach Pascal is going to save a couple of million.
Oh, man, I forgot about that one. Good call.
Cut Zach Pascal, cut Dennis Daly. But here's the thing that I would do, not because I just think it's going to be better for the building of the roster that's trading Buddha. Because I feel this offseason, there's one of two things going to happen. You're going to extend him or you're going to trade him. And so I trade him. What the terms of the trade are going to be, I don't know. But this is just I think he will ultimately get traded this offseason. And so I'm going with that move. And so after my moves, because that's going to save them a whole bunch of gifts of cap. So after trading Buddha, cutting Humphries, Pascal, and Daly, they're at $78.7 million in cap space. Lots of room. And then the first thing I do, this is my splash move. Now, I'm going to go with this. I am not signing a free agent for more than one season. So I'm not. I believe that the Cardinals are going to go with rare exception. They're going to go with a fill the roster. So I didn't sign anyone for more than 2 years. Is how my approach was for this. My first splash move is the same splash move that you made, and that's a trade. I'm going to assume it's going to take 35 or 27, and it might take. If not 27 this year, I think it'll take a pick this year and next year. Since he was, they might franchise him, it would take 2 firsts. If they take a second and this year and a second and a fourth, or a first and a fifth, I think that's kind of the route they go. But ultimately, I'm going to trade for L'Jarius Sneed. That's my splash move. And that's my biggest, and you had him at $590. I said $475. I figured that his cap hit this year would be $8 million. just throwing things. So I've got $70.7 million in cap space left. I then go and extend James Conner, but I don't think it's going to save any money against the cap this year. He's already got about a $7 million cap hit. No, he's at 8.9. So it will save a little bit money against the cap. And no matter what, you're going to carry $3 million of the previous contract. But when you pay him up front, I'm going to say, including this year, 3 years, $24 million. So it's basically 2 years beyond. You're going to pay him probably about $10 million up front. But I'm going to say that this is going to make it so that he's going to count about $7 million against the cap this year. That'll save about a couple of million, so it's at $60.7 million. But then you've got Connor extended, but not too far out. With the running back market, I think in the average of 8 per year is kind of the sweet spot. You're still rewarding Connor, and you are creating continuity. Then I'll talk about my re-signs. The guys that I think that they should resign that I talked about on the last show, I haven't re-signing. I'm going to go with Hollywood, 1 year, $12 million hit. Jeff Swaim, 1 year, $2 million. Elijah Wilkinson, 1 year, $2 million. We'll go Lecky, 2 years, $6 million on the defensive line. Bring back either Josh Woods or Chris Barnes at $2.5 million. And then you bring back Blake Gillikin at a 2 year, $4 million deal. And that's who I re-sign. After that, the guys that I bring in from outside the organization, no one gets more than 2 years. I go with the backup quarterback, Drew Lock, 2 years, $9 million. And he's going to have a $3 million cap hit. The quarterback one's really odd because I don't know what they would look for. And so, like, if they don't believe in Clayton Tune, are they just going to go out and get just a dude? Or are they going to try and get a guy who you can trust? Like last year, Josh Dobbs was like, why? And then he was good for 3 games, and he was terrible. Do you go with old like Tyra Taylor? He's going to be pricier. Or do you go with, I think Drew Lock is kind of he knows he's not going to start anywhere, right? Like unless he's going to an awful team. And I guess, the Cardinals may be an awful team. But
also the Falcons are somewhere where he might be able to start. Is that more important than?
Yeah. But so I go for Drew Lock as the backup quarterback, and I think that one works. I go for a running back, low key, Boston Scott, 1 year, $1.6 million. He's got some familiarity with Jonathan Gannon. He's not going to he'll play special teams, and so he's not going to rock the boat. But you can also see as a little bit of offensive upside to where he could be like a Michael Carter is, and he could compete for playing time viably behind James Conner.
Right.
But the tackle position, I go low end. But knowing we'll have to wait and see with the draft, but I go with George Fant. Played for the Texans last year, ended up starting most of the season at right tackle. And I go for him. And so while we have heard through channels that was sourced through someone we know that the plan is to put Paris Johnson or keep Paris Johnson at right tackle, I say no, not going to do that. I'm going to sign George Fant, give him 2 years, $6 million. Probably is kind of the sweet spot. I don't know. Maybe he'll cost more than that. Give him 2.5 against the cap this year. He projects as your starting right tackle. You move Paris to left tackle, and it takes care of the tackle position. So now you've got Fant and you've got Kelvin Beachum, and then if you draft a guy, that's just gravy.
I like that, by the way.
And the guard position, Jonah Jackson, I like. I don't think they'll splash quite that much. A couple of names that I like. That would be. It's a lower Dalton Risner. I go with Dalton Risner to play left guard. You give him 2 years, $9 million, going with the $4 million cap hit, and then so that you've rather inexpensively, and you still got guys on the roster. So you've got Elijah Wilkinson, who's a veteran who can play guard tackle. You've got John Gaines coming back. Whether he can be the center of the future or left guard of the future, we'll wait and see. But then you're not too invested in that deal that Risner's getting is roughly the contract that Will Hernandez got last year. And so nothing too crazy. Defensive line, I take two 49ers. I'll take Javon Kinlaw, 2 years, $13 million. So we do cross paths like that. And you went with Greg Gaines. I'm going to go with the other guy that we've talked about leading up to Super Bowl, Sebastian Joseph Day. And I give him 2 years and $6 million. And you're going to see some. So your guys are going to see that guys that I talked about previously, since I talked about as I thought they would good fits, I'm going to target. So, and kind of spreading the love around, active in free agency, nothing too splashy other than the trade for Snead. So we got Drew Lock at quarterback. You kind of hitting all the little areas that they need. You've got another running back. You bring back a receiver in Hollywood Brown. If I'm looking for another receiver as kind of my backup plan, if he's going to cost too much, here's what I had planned for them at receiver as who was that guy? Let me pull up the receivers that I was looking at. You could go Josh Reynolds. Like, we think it's going to be everything is going to work out draft-wise, and they're going to get one of those top 3 receivers at the top. So you feel pretty good about that.
Well, I mean, they definitely are going to get one of them. It's just a matter of...
If that's what they want, if that's ultimately what they want, they know they're getting one of those guys. I'd like a guy like Josh Reynolds. Not going to cost too much, right? He's not going to be cheap. 2 years, $15 million, which is still a bigger splash than we've done before. You could go as well. Who's another? I'll say this: I really like Gabriel Davis, but he's going to cost more money than I think that the Cardinals are going to be willing. Juwan Jennings is a So if the 49ers do not tender Juwan Jennings, okay, as a restricted free agent, I'll go 2 years, $12 million for him, or maybe I think we'll go that route, or maybe 2 years, $8 million, because he's a guy who can fill. We've seen him do stuff. He comes up. Actually, that's not true. I forgot. This is the guy, KJ Osborne. He's the guy I like the best because he does you've got big play potential out of him. We've seen him. We saw him cook the Cardinals a couple of years ago. He's got a little bit of he's you could get big games from him, but you can't count on him to be a number one. And so you get him kind of at 2 years, 15, and he's my backup. So I'm going to go for Hollywood, and if that doesn't work out, I'm going to target KJ Osborne instead. And then you can mix him in there in the mix with Greg Dortch and Rondell Moore. If you think Moore can do more, Moore can do more. That's what I do that way. Then going to the defensive side of the ball, well, I was already there with Kinlaw and Sebastian Joseph Day. The linebacker I go after, so I've already re-signed either Woods or Barnes. I'm either way on those. I'm bringing back Lecky Fotu, and so we've got 2 new defensive linemen. I'm going to bring back as well LJ Collier, and I talked about this as I think he's a really good match as Drew Tranquill from the Chiefs. Give him roughly the same contract that Kaiser White got. If you look at their career arc, they're kind of the same thing. And give him 2 years, $9 million, and he'll count about $4 million against the cap this year. And then I'm going to re-sign Blake Gillikin. And then at safety, obviously there's a hole at safety, and that's the one thing that I had the harder time. And what the side I go with, because while they have Andre Sacheret under contract, and they trust Sacheret, they trust him enough that he can start. That doesn't mean I want him starting. I go out and go get Mike Edwards, who's been a starter, but was more of a kind of a nickel defensive back. He played 17 games for the Chiefs, started 5 of them, had an interception, broke up 5 passes, had a fumble, led the league with 101 fumble recovery yards. He had 51 tackles. And you kind of go with the workmanlike defensive backfield there at safety instead of the star. You've got your really good safety in Jalen Thompson, and then a serviceable safety in Mike Edwards, and you're not going to break the bank for them. And that way, basically, you've taken the money that, honestly, the money that you saved from Buddha, you've been able to put into immediate cap hit in L'Jarius Smith, although that cost draft capital, and then your defensive linemen. And you basically, now if you're talking just straight cap, both free agent defensive linemen that you signed, plus the linebacker, so you get 2 interior guys and a starting linebacker for the cap hit that you were going to get from Buddha. And then you bring in a serviceable safety. I don't know if this makes your defense better. It obviously doesn't make it better on the back. Well, the addition of Snead does make that back end better, and your front end is better. And so that is the route that I go. And I end up, in the end, with still about 20 million, 18 million in cap space, which means you can sign your rookie class. You've still got about, 10 million in space after you have to make it, and which leaves a little bit of flexibility for extensions or trades laid down the line, or injuries, things that happen.
Moves for injuries and things of that nature.
And what do you think of those moves?
Yeah, I like it, man. I like the fact that you're able to, I know people are going to freak out about Buddha.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I don't want that, but like we've seen with basically every team, when you bring in a new head coach, there is a star player there is a very good player who ends up getting traded or cut. Not because it's not because of football play at all.
And like we've said before, it'd be different if this was a team if this team had been close, or the defense had been close, I guess would be the better way to put it. But instead, it hasn't been. And so to just continue to do the same thing and continue to pay the same guys and then expect different results is just asking for problems. So, yeah, I think I like that. I like the moves you made. I would love Drew Tranquil, but after his drunken performance at the Kansas City parade, I just don't know if he wants to go anywhere but Kansas City, right? Now again, it's always coach.
They're Scottsdale.
Yeah, well,
if you want to be drunk, Scottsdale, right. Man. No, he loved winning. He loved winning. It's going to be hard to pull any of those guys from Kansas City. Here's the only guys you can pull from a team like Kansas City are the young guys that are about to get paid. That's why Tyreek Hill left. That's why L'Jarius Sneed's on the trade block. But yeah, I guess I'm trying to build I didn't realize that I did it, but of the free agents of the addition, I've got 2 49ers and 3 Chiefs.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you want to do, is go get guys that have been in successful programs and then see if you can build on that, right? And it doesn't have to be guys that are going to be stars, but guys that can come in and help build the culture of the program. And that's, from the beginning of this until now, that's something we've talked about, right? Is that they need to build that culture, and the first steps were taken with the NFLPA report card, and now bringing in guys that fill that culture, that allow you to do a little bit more each and every day, and things of that nature. And yeah, I like how we both kind of went about that, and what we were looking to do for the success to find it, because it was about getting guys that were good fits. There were some splashes on both sides, but finding guys that fit what you're looking for.
Now, the only thing I think, if I could have done another one, I didn't add anyone on the pass rush, which is probably a mistake, and I would overlook that as I was I don't know.
It's just so hard
it's hard.
envision it even happening.
Right, because you're either going to make a big splash for someone who's, not going to – they're expensive. And is Chase Young – can the Cardinals pull Chase Young from San Francisco? I don't know. And are the other pass rushers out there, they're either old or unproven, and so I guess you're going to have to wait for something else. That's the one area I wish I could have felt comfortable with, but I didn't. Somehow I didn't think that I was going to be able to build half of the defense with 49ers in Chase Young and Javon Kinlaw and the Sebastian Joseph Day, and then adding Jadarius. I didn't think that was viable.
Probably not, and that's why, like I said, I think we did a good job of trying to make it more realistic, right?
And I like how I envision the offense looks pretty complete. You think that assuming they had Harrison or Odunze or Neighbors, that a trio at receiver with one of those three guys plus Hollywood plus Michael Wilson, and then guess what? You can use Hollywood primarily in the slot, and you have a really nice, honestly, the way they run their offense, you kind of get the more traditional roles for those receivers. You've got size on the outside, and you've got quickness and speed on the inside. And now you don't have to expect anything from Rondale Moore other than gadget guy. And I like that. Greg Dortch still has that 4 role, or the 4 or 5 role, and you don't have to count on him for any particular thing. But it allows people to emerge, and the injuries are going to happen at some point. And so, and you get Trey McBride. You have the running back room full. You have a starting offensive line that's serviceable by adding George Fant and Dalton Risner, or whether it's that guy or another, journeyman type guard, plus your tight ends, and you really feel like the offense is competent as is, and really could compete, while the defense strides, but you'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and I like the way it's coming together. The vision is clear, but it's also different because we just don't know exactly what to expect from Monty yet, right?
Yeah.
But we do know that they want guys that it's more about the love of the game and then guys and violence than it is anything else, and that's kind of what they're looking at now. And so, how do those guys work out in this area, and are they guys that at least fit what that billing is? And I think both of us did a good job with that. The one exception, and we both had him, and it's not any question marks about his love of the game or anything like that, but like Javon Kinlaw would be probably the biggest question mark on both sides.
Yes. That's on. We didn't take major risk. Obviously, going out and spending that type of money on L'Jarius Sneed is risky, but look what we saw. What do we see? And he's a physical, and he fits physically and schematically for the type of player that we know that Jonathan Gannon wants on his defense. And
right.
So we feel pretty good about that risk. You want guys that can cover. You want guys that are physical, that can make plays on the ball. And I think, he won't have a Trent McDuffie on the other side, but I think he will be just fine in this defense.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And with that, we will wrap up this edition of the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. We've had 2 shows of free agency. Seth and I gave our plans. We'll see how that goes, if anything goes according to what we would do. Not that we are proclaiming ourselves as great general managers by any means. Next week, we've got 2 draft shows about the Combine. Tune in for that. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening as always. We'll be back again next week with 2 shows on the Combine. Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up Sea Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms, so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red Sea Red, and of course, Rise Up Sea Red.